other citizens, for Trump. So a lot of people know this about me. I've talked about it a little bit, not too much, but I've talked about it from time to time. That I served Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Joint Task Force, Guantanamo Bay. So I'm actually someone who served there. Serving, working in Guantanamo Bay, right? I've actually seen the conditions there. I've walked through the camps. I've met the detainees. I've walked into the cells at Guantanamo Bay. I know a lot of them by name. You know, I've worked with them. I've spent time with them. We're practically living with Guantanamo Bay detainees when we're down there. So suffice to say, I know a lot about Guantanamo Bay, all right? I don't talk about it that much because multiple reasons, I suppose. I mean, it doesn't always come up, but I also don't want to be one of those people that, I've never wanted to be one of those people that just sort of relies on their previous service, you know, as a way to sort of be relevant. I don't want to only be known for the guy who used to be in the Navy, right? There's more to my life than that. But it is a big part of my life, and it was a big part of my life. And something I'm very proud of, very, very proud of. And I gotta tell you, I've gotta tell you, Tommy Robinson and the treatment that he received was far, far worse than how we treated the detainees at Guantanamo Bay. Compared to what Tommy Robinson had to go through for the last 2 months, these guys were on like a pleasure cruise. Now, obviously it's a lot longer. Some of them have been there 13 years or more now, only 2 months, but I'm talking about the basic treatment. So let me tell you something. Most detainees at Guantanamo Bay, they are given 22 hours out of their cell. Most of them do not have solitary confinement. They have what's called communal living. So as long as you're compliant, as long as you're don't have any discipline issues, you're allowed to be with the rest of the detainees and, you know, communal living, like Orange is the New Black style, if you guys have seen that. So without all the violence and the drama, but it is a little drama. But the main drama that ever came up there was like, what were we gonna watch on TV at a certain time? Or somebody wants to watch soccer, or somebody else wants to watch cricket, somebody else wants to watch the news, right? Literally fighting over the TV remote was probably the biggest issue, because in the communal spaces, there would only be like one TV per cell block. So, yeah, so they would argue over that. They got to go outside, they got to play soccer, they got, by the way, and the food they got, all of it was, you know, religiously compliant. It was halal. Everything they got to eat was perfectly clean and purified. They got, you know, fantastic treatment, state-of-the-art medical facilities, by the way, completely free. They got classes. They got to go to classes. So they got to go to foreign language classes. They got to go to business class, computers class, art class. If you wanted to learn painting and the finer points of pointillism, and you were a Guantanamo Bay detainee, you could do that. And it was provided free of charge by the United States taxpayer to members of Al-Qaeda, okay? I saw this. I saw this with my own 2 eyes, all right? I'm telling you, this is what was done. By the way, huge library, probably about 20,000 different books they had there. Every language you could think of. If they didn't have a specific language for a specific detainee, they would get it. If you know, wanted periodicals, they would actually have those. So they would have newspapers that would come in on a fairly frequent basis. So they could get access to, you know, access to current news. So there are New York Times and Washington Post subscriptions that are coming down to Guantanamo Bay detainees, right? Paid for by you, the taxpayer. What else? You know, magazines, movies, DVDs, you name it. You name it. PlayStation. They got to play PlayStation 2. I actually remember when I was there, they were complaining because they wanted PlayStation 3, but we only were able to get them PlayStation 2. So they were all complaining and accusing us of being torturers, kid you not, because we got them PlayStation 2, but they really wanted PlayStation 3, all right? That's the level of treatment at Guantanamo Bay for the detainees right now. And they pray together 5 times a day, they eat together, you know, they live together. Of course, they're still held in captivity, they are detained, right? There is a process by which a lot of them were going through military courts that were set up while I was there. No, I was there under the Obama administration. I don't know exactly how things are now, so I can't speak for that, but we know that Obama did let out a lot of them. So he let out over 100, I want to say, or close to that, to include, of course, the 4 Taliban generals that were let out in exchange for Bo Bergdahl, the deserter. Some actual war criminals that were let out in exchange for Bo Bergdahl, the deserter, was later court-martialed. So Tommy Robinson, how was he treated by comparison, right? Tommy Robinson was given 1 hour a day out of his cell, not 22, right? So 22 hours a day, they were allowed out of the cell. Tommy Robinson, 1 hour a day. When he was let out by himself into a yard that was, he says, was about 100, I think he said it was about 100 square feet yard, that he still had a chain on, and he was allowed to walk around in a circle in this yard. And that was his exercise for the day, getting to see the sun for 1 hour a day. Then he was eating about 1 can of tuna for his meals, for his daily meals. He was eating 1 can of tuna because he was worried that other prisoners were actually preparing the food. So instead of like we had it, we never had prisoners or, you know, detainees preparing food. You know, we had, you know, people that we hired, you know, officials that were doing that were supervised by the detention center, you know, by the military. So we didn't have prisoners preparing food. That, I mean, that's insane. That's actually insane to think that that's what was going on, because a situation like that obviously leads to a lot of conflicts, obviously leads to a lot of security threats and possible threats to life. As anyone who knows anything about prisons or has spent even a day in a prison would know, you know, whether observing or working like I was, right? So Tommy was forced to purchase, apparently, tuna fish because he was getting threats from the prisoners who made his food to say that they were going to kill him. They were saying that they were going to kill him by either poisoning his food or slipping something into it. I don't know exactly. Then they kept him in a single room, no air conditioning, in the middle of the summer, and I was just over in London, I gotta tell you, it was not the normal, you know, you always hear of like London being cold and damp and everything. And I'm sure most of the time it is, but when I was just there for the Free Tommy rally, it was hot. It was like drenching hot. I wore a jacket. I shouldn't have worn a jacket. You know, I should have worn like a t-shirt or something. But it was so hot. Well, Tommy, because he was worried that people were started throwing stuff at him through his window, he had to now, because everyone else, all the other prisoners, were allowed outside in the yard, Tommy wasn't allowed in the yard. So they were throwing things at his window. Right? And so he had to close up his window. Now, that is something that I can tell you that did happen at Guantanamo Bay, because the detainees, despite of how we treated them, some of them still wanted to continue jihad against, you know, the US military, US government. So they would do something called splashing. Splashing is when a detainee would secretly prepare a concoction, really, a cup, I guess, or a bottle of sort of a mixture of urine and feces and blood, just all sorts of, you know, human waste that they would mix up in a cup and then would target, you know, a specific guard and throw it on them. No, I wasn't a guard, I worked intel, so I never got splashed, thank God. But, you know, what other you can only imagine what kind of bloodborne pathogens. We're talking, of course, people from, you know, from Afghanistan, people from Libya, people from Syria, people from Egypt, Tajikistan, you name it, are all coming through these areas. So they're splashing U.S. guards with this, U.S. military members, men and women, by the way, because we did have female guards, which is a whole nother story, but men and women. And yeah, so we had actual splashings that were done. So what we're hearing now is that a lot of those same types of tactics were being used not on the guards, but on Tommy Robinson from other prisoners where he was held, at the place where he was kept. And we all know this, that he was taken from a prison that was relatively safe to one of the most dangerous prisons. They had him in one of the most dangerous prisons. They moved him to one of the most dangerous prisons for no reason whatsoever. They said they moved him for his safety, but they moved him from a safe prison to one of the most dangerous prisons. So how does that even make any sense? How does it make any sense to move someone from a safe prison to one of the most dangerous prisons, right? He's in a place of safety already. Why would you move him to a dangerous prison? It makes no sense. It literally makes no sense whatsoever. Someone's asking, what is splashing? I don't want to explain it again. Go back and watch the Periscope from the start, because I don't have very good memories of it, even though, thank God, it never happened to me, right? I was intel, I wasn't one of the guards. So the UK, keep in mind now, the UK, look at how they react to all of the Guantanamo Bay detainees that were held there that had a connection to Saudi Arabia or the UK, okay? Shakir Amar probably being one of the biggest ones of those. Shakir Amar, just go look up Shakir Amar in the UK, how he was treated, how he was compensated, given money by the the UK government upon his release, given, I want to say it was £25,000, I could be wrong, more. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I know he was given money by the UK government upon his release. This guy, who was a member of Al-Qaeda, who was a terrorist, who did support acts of terrorism by Al-Qaeda, he was treated so well by the UK government. He was given almost what you would say a hero's welcome, Shakir Amar. So I want you to look up Shakir Amar. Maybe I'll do some tweets about this, about how Shakir Amar was treated by the UK government upon his release, because they said what was going on in Guantanamo Bay was torture, even though it wasn't. Torture was never done at Guantanamo Bay. The enhanced interrogation program was never carried out at Guantanamo Bay. It was only ever done at CIA black sites by people like John Brennan, okay? But Shakir Amar, when he was brought back, was given a hero's welcome by the UK government. Meanwhile, they're throwing Tommy Robinson in jail. So explain that. They're throwing him in jail and treating him very poorly, very unfairly, compared to the way that they complained about terrorists treatment at Guantanamo Bay. Now, I'll touch on another issue because I know it comes up a lot in this, and that's enteral feeding. Okay, so this was when they would go and do the feeding through the nostrils, because people were on hunger strike. So we were ordered to not allow the prisoners, the detainees, to commit suicide. The detainees were not allowed to commit suicide, so we had to stop that. So what we would do is we had the military insert a feeding tube right here. When they refused, after they refused to eat, we would have them insert a feeding tube right here, go down the throat so they couldn't bite it off, and then we would pour the inshore down. Doing a Periscope, Lee, I'm doing a Periscope. We're talking about Guantanamo Bay and Tommy Robinson. You wanna say hi? Sure. You wanna say hi? Hey, we got a special guest on the Periscope here. Lee Stranahan, you guys know him, you guys love him. He's on. You love the glasses. I've got to love them. Look at these. They're like blue. It's like a.
These are my Budapest. These are my European glasses.
It's like Terminator over here.
I bought them in Budapest.
Bought them in Budapest. Did you go to Budapest after Helsinki?
Yeah, I did. I went to Budapest,
London. I should have done that.
Then Helsinki.
Oh, that's so cool.
Then Budapest.
So I was talking about how, just doing a quick rundown. So I served Guantanamo Bay.
Yes.
And I'm comparing that to Tommy Robinson and how he was treated in the UK prisons to Guantanamo Bay. They get 22 hours a day outside of their cells. He got 1.
Yeah, right.
Right. You know, they got 3 squares a 3 squares a day, all halal compliant, all prepared by chefs that were hired, specially hired and specially trained. his food was prepared by prisoners.
Now here's the question.
So
I
he
have.
didn't need it.
When you were at Guantanamo serving, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
How did they feed you? I'm just asking.
I mean, we got fed all right. Honestly, a lot of the times we got fed kind of the same stuff because they would just make, they were already making so much of that they would just make more and we would get fed the same stuff.
That's funny. Okay.
Yeah, but then we had, you know, Taco Tuesdays and everything else, but I would say it was par. It was on par with what the detainees were getting.
There were two things I wanted to do in London that I didn't get to do. One was go to the Ecuadorian embassy.
Yes.
For the Assange thing. And
well,
the
you can't go any. I mean, you can't even go in. That's why I didn't go.
I would have, at least to make the appearance. But I had.
That's fair.
I had 2 12-hour days. I went out to Salisbury where the poisonings.
Oh, you went. So I was thinking about doing that, but then I didn't end up going.
I'm the only.
I didn't have, well, because my flight, it's a long story, my flight was delayed and then I didn't get there until like the day before.
If you had gone, you would have been the other journalist.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking. Nobody's
gone.
Here's what's happened. I talked to like 16 people out there. Nobody believes the government story.
Wow.
At best, the people I talked to said, well, maybe the Russians did it, maybe we did it, maybe England did it.
They said both.
They said both.
They said
both.
both.
That was the best.
Did you Periscope this?
I Periscoped a little bit. A little tiny bit, and I shot footage that we're going to put into a documentary.
All right, well, we're on that. We're doing an OAM piece. We're going to talk Bill Browder. I think we should talk this too, though. This Alice.
Yeah. Well,
too.
it's
but
fascinating.
The last piece I wanted to hit on Tommy Robinson. So the enteral feeding, right? Enteral feeding was done at Guantanamo Bay, and that's when these guys would be on hunger strike and refuse to eat. They wanted to kill themselves, and our orders from the Obama administration, by the way, because I was there under Obama, were do not let them kill themselves. So so we would actually track how many calories these guys were eating, their caloric intake for a day, and then if people were getting below, you know, what you need to survive, we would then refer them over to the Joint Medical Group, and Joint Medical Group would put a feeding tube down their nose, and then, you know, basically use like Ensure, like the protein shakes kind of thing. But by the way, and I'm sure you know about this, a completely normal and routine medical procedure that's done in the U.S. to accident victims. That's done to if you have surgery on, you know, any of your throat.
They don't do it because it's torture.
Right. It's not, and so these guys would claim it's torture, but it's actually just a medical procedure.
It's the opposite of torture.
Right. It's keeping you alive.
Yeah.
It's keeping you alive. And we would do that, by the way, so they couldn't bite off the feeding tube. That's why it went straight to your stomach. So this is done to.
And they could have said, "I'll skip that.
Anyone.
I'll just have a cheeseburger or whatever."
Right. They could have.